In the opening scene, a volcano blows its top on Ayaka Island in Japan. Two little boys, Jingi and Yukito, are running like crazy, trying to escape. Jingi promises to keep Yukito safe and tells him to stick with him as they head for a ferry that's ready to get them off the island. They finally make it to the ferry and run into an old guy in a suit who looks like a local teacher. The old man asks about Momoko, and Jingi explains that Momoko-san is still helping people evacuate from the areas being destroyed by the eruption. The old man tells them to hop on the ferry before it's too late, but Jingi is worried about Haruniai and Akane, who haven't shown up yet. The old man reassures him that Master Makoto Yanagi went to rescue them from the volcano, but he warns that if Yanagi doesn't make it back in time, something bad might have gone down. Yanagi, being overly confident and kind of clueless, doesn't know when to quit. He decides it's a good idea to go on one last adventure and head straight into the volcano like it's no big deal. Suddenly, there's a huge explosion, and everyone on the ferry freaks out, wondering what happened to Yanagi, their master and Yukito's dad. Spoiler alert, that's the end of Yanaja Nobody's making it out of a volcanic eruption alive. Yukito ends up in foster care and starts living with a family on the mainland. One day, he gets a letter from Inu Sanji, a friend of his late dad. Sanji explains that he sent Yukito to foster care so he could finish middle school, but now it's time to take him back to Ayaka village for high school, just like his dad wanted. Sanji promises to look out for him and make sure he has a good life. Yukito has no clue who this guy is, so he tosses the letter aside and goes to bed. That night, Yukito has the same dream he always has. He's underwater, all by himself, surrounded by these shiny little particles. He's not a people person, so being alone underwater in his dreams actually feels kind of nice. But then, he starts sinking deeper and deeper until he reaches this creepy, foggy area, and that's when he wakes up. Fast forward to middle school graduation. Everyone's hyped to be done with school, but Yukito, as usual, keeps to himself. While he's packing up his stuff, a teacher, Sensei, comes in to congratulate him. She asks him what's next, and Yukito, being the loner he is, says he's heading back to his hometown because his dad's friend told him to. Sensei thinks it's kind of messed up that they left him in foster care all these years and are only now showing up to take him back. But Yukito doesn't stick around to hear her sob story. He just walks off. The foster family has always been nice to him, but Yukito's lonely life is pretty much on him since he never bothered to connect with anyone. When Yukito steps out, he spots some loser chugging booze like a total waste of space. He wonders who the hell this lowlife is but doesn't really care that much. Feeling like the loner he is, Yukito keeps walking. The drunk dude notices Yukito and stumbles over to him, saying he's been waiting for him. Yukito, not exactly thrilled about some random drunk guy reeking of alcohol, shoves him away. But the drunk guy doesn't back off and suddenly shoves Yukito into the river. As Yukito starts drowning, it feels eerily like the dreams he's been having. His eyes start glowing this faint blue light, and he's freaking out, clueless about what's happening. Just before he's about to go under for good, the crazy drunk guy who pushed him in suddenly uses some kind of spell to pull him out of the water. Yukito is still trying to figure out who this lunatic is when the guy traps him in a magical bag. Turns out the drunk guy is Jingi, but since it's been years, Yukito doesn't recognize him. Jingi uses his magic bag to haul Yukito onto a ship in the middle of the ocean. Yukito loses it, yelling like a maniac, but Jingi tells him to chill. Jingi explains that they're heading to Ayaka Island, where Jingi is taking him home. He also mentions that Sanji, the old guy who sent Yukito a letter, asked him to do this. Jingi adds that Yukito's dad was not only a master but also like a father to him. Eventually, they arrive at the second Ayaka Island, where they're picked up by Mokoto, who's the landlord of Yukito's childhood home, as well as the mayor of Ayakashima City. Also, there is Sanji, Yukito's guardian. They give Yukito a warm welcome, and without wasting time, they hit the road toward the first Ayaka Island. On the way, Yukito spots a flying fish and gets curious about what kind of creature it is. When they finally reach home, Yukito still doesn't remember anything. They show him a picture of his late father, but Yukito isn't sure if the man was actually his real dad. Mokoto explains that Yukito's father was a lay master, someone who maintained balance on Ayaka. Yukito, clueless as ever, asks what lay means. Jingi breaks it down, saying lay, people are folks with special abilities, kind of like them. Yukito then asks if that's how Jingi managed to stuff him in the bag earlier. This question ticks off Mokoto, but Jingi quickly brushes it off, saying they were just messing around. Yukito starts thinking his own special ability might be the one he sees in his dreams, but Sanji shoots him down, saying all Yukito has right now is brute strength, and not even the basics figured out yet. Yukito asks about his mom, but no one can give him any answers. He wants to know why they suddenly showed up after leaving him at the foster home for years. Sanji explains that it was his dad's last wish before he passed away. Yukito agrees to move in with them, and they take him to his new room. When he gets there, he spots this weird flying fish thing outside his window and wonders what it is. Jingi walks in and tells him it's called a mitama. He says it's harmless, and that there are a bunch of them all over the island. Jingi also notices that Yukito is keeping his distance from everyone and asks why he's putting up walls. Yukito explains that when he was a kid, he and some other foster kids went on a picnic by the river. One of the kids was being a jerk, and Yukito got really mad. The next thing he knew, the river attacked the kid. Yukito didn't understand how it happened, but he was convinced it was his fault. Ever since then, he's kept people at arm's length to keep his emotions in check. But Jingi doesn't seem interested in the story. He's already playing a game on his phone or something. This ticks Yukito off, so he decides to step out and cool off before he loses it. He heads to the riverside and spots another type of mitama called an aramitama. This one's not so friendly, it's dangerous and way different from the one he saw earlier. The aramitama dives into the river and transforms into this massive, terrifying monster. Just as it's about to attack Yukito, Jingi shows up out of nowhere. Jingi casts a spell, and flames burst from his hand. Without hesitating, he hits the aramitama with a blazing fireball, and the monster explodes. Jingi acts all cocky and tells Yukito he should show him some respect. But then, the monster pulls itself back together. This time, Jingi tosses Yukito into the creature's stomach, expecting him to use his hidden strength to take it down. Yukito has no clue what's going on or how to use his powers. Jingi tells him he needs to figure out how to control them. Instead of shutting people out, Jingi says he should open up and let his emotions show. After all that chaos, they manage to head back home in one piece. The next morning, the booze-loving party guy, Jingi, wakes up hungover and finds Yukito chilling by the water at the crack of dawn. Yukito's trying to figure out how to wear his heart on his sleeve, just like Jingi told him to. Yukito's not sure if Jingi's goofy training methods will actually help him get a handle on his powers. Jingi, full of confidence, tells him he'll get the hang of it if he just focuses harder and taps into his lei energy. Yukito's like, lei energy? What's that? So, Jingi breaks it down for him. Lei energy is this super important force that flows deep in the earth, especially under Ayaka Island, where it surges in huge waves. But Jingi points out that Yukito's power is all over the place, totally out of control. He explains that syncing up with a big source of energy will help stabilize Yukito's abilities. Jingi then tells Yukito to try casting the spell he taught him to see how he's doing. Yukito crosses his arms, mimicking Jingi's signature move, and gives it a shot. He says, calm is water, which benefits all things. But yeah, it's a flop. All he manages to do is make a little bubble of water. Jingi, feeling the need to flex his skills, steps in to show him how it's done. He tells Yukito to watch closely, then casts the same spell, saying, calm is water, which benefits all things, flowing to places people avoid. This time, the water forms into a human-like shape that Jingi can control with ease. Yukito, though, isn't impressed. He doesn't care about fancy magic tricks, she just wants to figure out how to control his powers. After a while, Yukito decides to take a break from training. Meanwhile, Jingi stumbles back home, drunk as ever and reeking of booze. He starts rambling nonsense, thanks to all the alcohol. He tells Yukito that he tried to put his drinks on a tab, but the guys at the bar weren't having it and demanded he pay up. Now, Jingi's in debt and needs cash fast. He asks Yukito to work for him to help pay it off. Yukito's like, what? That's ridiculous, especially since he doesn't even know what kind of job he could do to make money. Jingi, still not making much sense, suggests that since Yukito is also a lay master, he could get a gig calming the Mitama spirits. As the story kicks off, these two goofballs, Yako and Chitaro, are digging through the job request box. Ever since the recent earthquake, there's been a spike in Era Mitama showing up, so they've been getting slammed with job requests. They pull out a new request, and Yako grabs it, saying he's gonna handle it. But Shitaro's not cool with that, and the two boneheads, who are students of Kurama Sensei, start squabbling over the card like kids fighting over candy. While they're busy tugging at it, Jingi shows up and snatches the card from Yako. The boys are super ticked and call him broke, but Jingi just brushes it off, saying he's not doing it for cash, he's just using it as training for Yukito. Then Jingi introduces Yukito to the two knuckleheads, saying he's the son of the late, legendary lay master, Makoto Yanagi. He adds that Yukito's back in town to train in lay mastery and tells them to hurry over to the third island to clean up the shrine's yard or something. Shitaro thinks they should tell Kurama Sensei right away that Yukito's here. On the way, Yukito asks Jingi, his lumberjack-looking master, about the two guys. Jingi calls them low-level grunts from Kasen Shrine, but thinks they'd make decent friends since they're all about the same age. Yukito's not so sure, saying his powers could stir up some drama if he gets too close. But Jingi shrugs it off, figuring since those two airheads are lay masters too, they can probably handle it. Then Jingi explains that Kasen Shrine is the go-to place for anything Aramitama related, and their head priest, Kumura Harauki, is actually his senior. Jingi's pretty sure that if he asks, Harauki will agree to train Yukito. The job they pulled is about calming down a Mitama that's been popping up in the canal lately. Mitama are basically chunks of life that come from lay energy. Normally, they're harmless, but if they get corrupted, they turn into Aramitama and start causing chaos. Right on cue, the Aramitama that's been lurking in the canals shows up out of the river. Yukito's not sure what to do, but Jingi tells him to stop overthinking and just jump into it. It's all part of his training. He promises to step in if Yukito can't handle it. But before Yukito can even react, Jingi's already bolting toward the east like some scared little kid. Yukito takes off after the idiot, and the water-formed Mitama starts chasing both of them. Yako and Shitaro rush over to their sensei, Kurama, to let him know that Jingi has kidnapped Yukito, Mikoto's son, and is up to no good. On top of that, Jingi even swiped a job request. Meanwhile, the Aramitama is still chasing Jingi and Yukito, but unexpectedly, it runs past Yukito and zeroes in on Jingi. To escape, they both dive into a river. On the other side of the river, there's an old man fishing. Suddenly, his hook snags something heavy. It's Jingi and Yukito. The old man assumes Jingi's drunk again, but Jingi, looking like a total mess, says they're being chased by the Aramitama, which is why they jumped into the river. The old man tells him to deal with the Mitama ASAP. Jingi explains that's exactly why he's risking his neck on this job. Yukito feels like they're at a major disadvantage going up against something this powerful. Jingi figures they'll have to pull out their trump card. They spot the Mitama in the river again, but it's just sitting there, not moving yet. They're confused about why it hasn't attacked. Jingi suggests Yukito act as bait, which makes Yukito furious. He snaps, wondering what kind of teacher uses their student as a decoy. They start arguing until the Aramitama finally notices them and charges straight at Jingi. Panicking, Jingi yells at Yukito to do something. Yukito tries out a spell he's been practicing, and this time, it actually works. The spell hits the Mitama right before it attacks Jingi. With the Mitama weakened, Jingi uses another spell to pacify it. Afterward, Jingi starts bragging and running his mouth. But then they notice the Mitama is filled with water and some booze cans, the kind Jingi's always drinking. Yukito gets suspicious and asks Jingi what he was up to last night. Jingi admits he was out drinking with friends, showing off his lay power. He demonstrated his water control spell, but got so wasted he doesn't remember what happened after that. Yukito pieces it together. Since water spells can absorb moisture and sustain themselves, the Mitama might actually be the water control spell Jingi summoned while showing off. That would explain why it's been chasing only him. Suddenly, the Mitama reforms and starts chasing Jingi again. Luckily, Kurama shows up just in time. He casts a spell on the water-based Aramitama, fully pacifying it. Yukito thanks Kurama for saving them. Kurama mentions that the last time he saw Yukito, he was just a little kid, but Yukito doesn't recognize him. Kurama formally introduces himself as Kurama Harauki and explains that he studied directly under Yukito's father. When they get back home, Kurama fills Mikoto in on the trouble Jingi caused. Mikoto is surprised, so Kurama explains that if lay mastery spells aren't cast properly, they can accidentally create openings for Mitama to form. Mikoto asks about Jingi, and Kurama says he's being punished by picking up all the booze cans scattered around the island. Mikoto suggests they have dinner without him since he won't be back anytime soon. During dinner, Kurama watches Yukito eat and comments that he hasn't changed. Abithe's still a fan of curry, just like when he was little. Yukito seems impressed by Kurama's spell on the Mitama. Kurama explains that Mitama go on violent rampages because they're suffering. When they're exposed to negative energy and lose control of their powers, they turn into Aramitama. Pacifying them restores them to normal. Jingi and Yukito are cruising over to the first island of Ayaka, riding this wild marine liner, which is basically a train skimming across the sea. Yukito's totally geeking out over how cool it is, like he's some small town kid seeing the big city for the first time. Jingi's not even fazed he's been there, done that. He remembers being just as hyped 10 years ago when he first hopped on the marine liner. He tells Yukito that everyone loses their mind the first time they ride it, but after a while, it's just another ride, and the excitement wears off. Yukito, though, is still pumped and asks if the train runs on some kind of magic spell. Jingi explains that the tracks are probably juiced up with lay mastery magic, but the train itself runs on good old diesel. They finally roll up to this fancy mansion owned by a guy named Sanji, who's on the first island. Sanji thinks Yukito's getting the hang of island life and asks him how he's liking Ayaka. Yukito, thinking back to his run-in with the crazy Aramitama, says the island's kinda out there. Sanji tells him to chill and take his time. He's sure Yukito will settle in eventually. Then, Sanji tells Jingi to show Yukito around, but Jingi, being the slacker he is, says he's got business to take care of, which apparently means hitting up the casino and pachinko parlor. Sanji suggests Yukito take a breather, but Yukito decides to tag along with Jingi anyway. The two wander around the first island, which is buzzing with lifetons of food, stalls, and music everywhere. Jingi explains that the first island is all about good eats and tunes, calling it ayastic. Yukito keeps hearing this word ayastic and is curious about what it means, but before he can ask Jingi, the guy's already wandered off. Yukito tries to track him down and suddenly hears Jingi arguing with some old dude selling chicken thighs. Turns out Jingi's trying to snag some broiled chicken thighs, but the seller isn't having it, saying they're already reserved for someone else. Funny thing is, the seller's totally cool with giving the chicken to Yukito for free, just not Jingi. The old guy tries to push some skewers on Jingi instead, but Jingi's being stubborn. Yukito grabs the skewer, drags Jingi away from the stall, and gets them out of there before things get even weirder. Yukito asks Jingi how he found out about the spot, and Jingi says his buddy, Maki-san, told him about it. Yukito's confused, wondering how Jingi has friends on the first island when he's always hanging out on the second island. Jingi, being his usual cocky self, brags that he's got friends everywhere. The first island feels like a tourist hotspot to most people, packed with musicians and street performers. They spot a street performer floating on a balloon, soaking up the crowd's applause. Out of nowhere, Jingi vanishes again. Suddenly, the balloon starts spewing black smoke, and everyone's freaking out. The clueless performer tries to get closer to the balloon, but Yukito already knows it's an Aramitama. Things are about to get wild, and Yukito needs Jingi's help, but the fool is nowhere to be found. The Mitama isn't as massive as the ones on the second island, so Yukito figures he can handle it. Then, out of the blue, a guy with pink hair shows up and starts blasting the Mitama with a gun until it collapses and disappears. Yukito's like, who the hell is this guy? And why is he shooting Mitama with a gun? Turns out, the pink-haired dude is Ibuki-san, but he tells Yukito to call him Akka. Yukito remembers hearing about Akka from Mokoto. Akka is one of Yukito's dad's students, but unlike the others, he doesn't pacify Mitama. Instead, he straight up kills them using either his gun with special spell bullets or his lay power. Akka takes Yukito back to his place and tells him to chill. Coincidentally, Jingi strolls in, and Yukito's like, what are you doing here? Jingi, acting all casual, says he came to check on Maki-san, but since Maki was busy, he decided to whip something up for himself. Yukito's annoyed at how laid back Jingi is, but Akka steps in to calm him down. Jingi then asks Yukito what he's doing with Akka, and Yukito explains that Akka saved his butt in the tourist area when an Aramitama attacked. Yukito's curious about the techniques Akka used on the Mitama. Unlike Kuruma and Jingi, who pacify Mitama and turn them back to normal, Akka's power makes the Mitama disappear completely. Akka says it's because instead of calming the Mitama down, he straight up destroys them. Yukito's confused, wondering why Akka doesn't just chill them out like Jingi and Kurama do. But Akka explains that a lot of tourists visit the first island, and since the Aramitama are dangerous, they need to be taken out to keep people safe. While they're talking, Ibara shows up to let Akka know they found the main body of the Aramitama. Yukito's shocked, so Akka breaks it down for him. The Mitama Yukito saw earlier was just a piece of the bigger Aramitama. The main Mitama has these creepy, core-like pupil eyes, and the one Yukito saw didn't, meaning it was just a fragment of the real deal. Jingi tells Yukito that Akka's security team is all about protecting tourists from the dangerous Mitama. Yukito isn't cool with the idea of killing them, but Jingi thinks Akka's doing the right thing. Yukito asks how Kurama feels about Akka's methods, but Jingi warns him to never bring up Akka and Kurama together. They don't get along, like oil and water. Out of nowhere, Jingi remembers he forgot to pick up his allowance for working at Akka's shop, so he bails, telling Yukito to head home without him. Suddenly, Yukito hears people screaming and rushes over, realizing they're under attack by the Mitama. But this time, it's the main Aramitama, and it's massive. Yukito decides to try out a spell he's been learning from Jingi, even though he knows it could go horribly wrong. He gives it a shot, and while the spell works, it's not strong enough to calm the giant Mitama. Eika's security team starts firing at it, but they run out of bullets. That's when Eika shows up, takes off his suit, and gets ready to go all out. Jingi knows Akka's about to use some dark magic to finish the job. Akka starts chanting some intense spell. Bold is the warrior, wrathful is the fighter, victory is achieved through pride, and such is the height of wickedness. His hand turns into this huge black hand. He uses it to rip out the Mitama's core, smashes it, and drinks its blood. Akka then declares he'll become stronger than Kurama, the Dead Master, and even the dragon. Jingi and Yukito leave the first island and head to the third one. The third island's got a totally different vibe compared to the first two. It's kind of underdeveloped, but has this serious, quiet feel to it. Jingi, who's been partying hard for 2 nights straight after hitting it big at Pachinko, looks totally wiped out. Yukito asks if Jingi comes to the third island often, but Jingi brushes it off, saying the place is boring, just a bunch of trees and not much else. He only came because Yukito asked him to take him to see Kurama. Jingi mentions he only swings by during festivals, but Kurama and his goofy students, Yato and Chitaro, are the ones who actually hang out there regularly. Yukito already knows the names of Kurama's students, which catches Jingi off guard. When Jingi asks how he knows, Yukito says he heard it from Mikoto, who's been trying to buddy up with the lumberjacks on the island. Apparently, those guys are always bickering over the dumbest stuff. Before long, Chitaro and Yato show up at the park to pick them up, just like Kurama told them to. On the way to the Kessen shrine, they start chatting, curious about how Yukito's settling into island life. Yukito's still kind of overwhelmed by everything, especially all the Mistama stuff and the marine laner. The islanders have been super nice to him, but since he spent most of his life alone, he's not really sure how to handle all the kindness. As they get closer to the Kessen shrine, Yukito starts wondering what the deal is with the shrine and why the third island feels so different from the first two. Yato explains that the Kessen shrine is dedicated to 2 dragon bosses sown of fire and 1 of water. These dragons have been chilling, and sometimes not chilling, on the 4th island for ages. Whenever one of them loses it, chaos breaks out, so the shrine was built to keep them calm. Chitaro chimes in, saying that when they were kids, the fire dragon went on a rampage, causing a volcanic eruption that even messed up the first island. The water dragon eventually calmed things down, leaving behind a crater lake. The shrine's main attraction is this volcanic rock that looks like the lake. Yukito remembers Akka saying he wanted to be stronger than the dragons, which makes him even more curious about them. Chitaro and Yato, meanwhile, are used to Jingi being a total booze hound, but they're not exactly thrilled about it. They think it's embarrassing for a Yanagi student to be tied to someone like him. Jingi, being his usual clueless self, says he needs a break from all the walking and wants a drink to cure his hangover. He figures the peach blossoms should be blooming by now and tries to drag Chitaro and Yato along to enjoy the flowers and have a drink. But things don't go as planned. They end up slipping into a lake. Kurama steps out of the shrine and greets Yukito warmly. He suggests they get the soaked losers some fresh clothes before they freeze. Yukito tags along with Kurama to the shrine's archives, and Kurama tells him to chill and make himself at home. He even offers Yukito some candy. Since Yukito was the one who asked Jingi to bring him to Kurama, Kurama cuts to the chase and asks why he's here. Yukito says he ran into Akka and explains that Akka's been taking out the Mitama, but he's using some weird method. Apparently, Akka is blasting the Mitama with some special gun and using some kind of strange power on them. Kurama figures Yukito might be freaked out by the whole black magic vibe of killing Mitama, so he asks the kid how much he actually knows about ley energy. Turns out, Yukito doesn't know much, just the basics that his shady master Jingi told him. All he's got is that ley energy flows under the earth, and ley masters tap into it to do their thing. Kurama thinks that's pretty surface level stuff, and starts wondering if maybe he should step in and be Yukito's teacher instead of leaving him with the useless Jingi. Kurama shows Yukito the 1st, 2nd, and 4th islands, explaining that Ayaka Island has a massive current of ley energy running underneath it. He tells Yukito to focus and close his eyes to try and feel it. Ley energy is everywhere, but Ayaka is practically bursting with it. On the mainland, you might catch faint traces of it in old shrines, special trees, or rocks, but Ayaka is on a whole other level. Kurama breaks it down. Ley masters borrow this energy to cast spells. He also mentions the Mitama bubbles floating around the island. They're harmless most of the time, but if an area gets all messed up or stagnant, they can turn into Aramitama, which is bad news. Yukito remembers Akka eating a Mitama after killing it and asks why he did that. Kurama explains that Akka was trying to absorb the Mitama's power, but by doing so, he's basically corrupting himself, which is a big no-no for a ley master. While they're talking, those two goofballs, Yato and Chitaro, call Yukito over, saying they've got something to talk about. Meanwhile, Jingi shows up to chat with Kurama. Kurama asks Jingi about Akka, and Jingi says Akka doesn't look too great after eating the Mitama. Still, Jingi being the clueless guy he is thinks Akka's doing it because he doesn't want more people to die. Kurama disagrees, saying that no matter the reason, it's not the right move. Nature's law is that everyone dies eventually, and everything goes back to the ley energy. Kurama decides he needs to whip Jingi into shape so he can be a better master for Yukito. That way, Yukito won't have to keep coming to Kurama with questions about ley energy and Akka. Chitaro and Yato take Yukito to their training spot to show off their skills and powers, hoping to impress him and become friends. Yukito has always wanted to be friends with them too, but he's been scared of losing control of his powers and accidentally hurting them. Since Yukito is the son of their master's master, the boys figure he must have some serious potential, and they think it'd be perfect for him to train under their master as well. At the training garden, Then, Chitaro and Yato try to win Yukito over by flexing their powers. Chitaro goes first, casting a spell that makes a small tree sprout from the ground. Not to be outdone, Yato casts his own spell, and another tree, about the same size, pops up. The two knuckleheads start arguing over whose tree is bigger, trying to one-up each other to impress Yukito. Before things get heated, Yukito steps in to calm them down. They're still convinced he's got some hidden talent, so they ask him to show off his powers too. Yukito hesitates but finally casts a spell. To everyone's shock, a massive tree with blooming flowers starts growing out of control. Yukito can't stop either. His powers are still too wild. The tree keeps growing, and the boys start freaking out, begging him to stop it. Luckily, Jingi happens to be nearby. He steps in and teams up with Yukito to cast a spell that finally halts the tree's growth. Once the tree stops, Jingi, as usual, starts bragging about how awesome he is and then takes off. Chitaro and Yato are blown away by Yukito's power and beg him to stick with them and train under their master. But since Jingi helped him out, Yukito decides to stick with Jingi instead. Yukito's been grinding away at learning how to use and control ley energy spells. He's getting better, but he's still not hitting his full stride yet. He casts a spell by saying, "A fish isn't meant to leave the water," which creates a strong water barrier. Normally, you're supposed to start by sending out the ley energy and then pulling it back, but Yukito does it backward and, honestly, that's fine. Jingi tells him to lift the water barrier over his head, and then, like the carefree drunk he is, Jingi climbs up the water barrier bubbles as part of Yukito's training. The goal is to help Yukito control the ley energy and stop it from going haywire. Suddenly, there's this earthquake-like rumble on Ayaka Island, and Yukito freaks out, loses focus, and the water barrier crashes down. The next day, Yukito talks to Makoto about the earthquake, but Makoto brushes it off, saying Ayaka is a volcanic island, so earthquakes are no big deal. Yukito thinks Mokoto should be more worried, but Mokoto explains that there are emergency plans in place to evacuate if a big one hits. While they're chatting, Jingi shows up, but instead of adding anything useful to the conversation, he asks Mokoto for money, kind of like an annoying little brother always begging for cash. Yukito's not thrilled about it, but Makoto hands over the money anyway and tells Jingi to say hi to Yanagi-sensei. Jingi shamelessly takes the cash and tells Yukito they're heading to visit his dad's grave that day. When they get to Yukito's dad's grave, they find a bunch of Mitama spirits messing around. Jingi grabs a broom, shoos them away, and starts cleaning up the grave. Afterward, Jingi, being the drunk he is, pulls out some booze. Yukito's confused and asks what's going on, because it all seems pretty weird to him. Then, two women and an old bald guy show up at the grave to pray for protection from the earthquakes. They've brought snacks and drinks with them, but Jingi, acting like a gatekeeper, tells them they have to hand over their snacks and drinks if they want access to the grave. They think it's ridiculous, but go along with it anyway. Meanwhile, Yukito's just standing there, not sure how to react or join in. The old bald guy tells Yukito that 10 years ago, they survived a massive volcanic eruption thanks to his dad. Yukito asks what his dad did, and the old man realizes Jingi hasn't told Yukito much about his father. Jingi explains that 10 years ago, a fire dragon caused the volcano to erupt. The earthquakes happening now are because the fire dragon is getting stronger. Yukito asks why the fire dragon is getting so powerful, and Jingi explains that 15 years ago, the lake on the fourth island dried up, and for some reason, the fire dragon's rival, the water dragon, disappeared. This threw off the balance between the two dragons, and the fire dragon started growing out of control, kind of like how Mitama spirits turn into Ara Mitama when they lose balance. If nothing changes, the volcano on the fourth island will erupt again, and all of Ayaka will sink into the ocean. That's exactly what almost happened 10 years ago. But Yukito's dad, Master Makoto, stepped in. He performed a dragon pacifying ritual and managed to suppress the fire dragon's raging power. Thanks to him, the island was saved, and peace was restored. Turns out, the safety of the whole island rested on Yukito's dad's shoulders. Ibara walks by looking all kinds of upset. Jingi tries to say, hey, but she doesn't say a word and just keeps it moving. Jingi heads over to her family's grave to pay his respects, since it's also the anniversary of her parents' death. Yukito starts wondering if she's mad because they're out here celebrating on a day that's supposed to honor her parents. Turns out, Ibara accidentally dropped her key near the graveyard, and Yukito finds it. He figures they should head to the first island to give it back to her since she's probably gonna need it. Jingi, always looking for a chance to hustle, agrees to tag along. While they're on their way, they bump into these two clowns, Yako and Chitaro. Yukito's like, what are you two idiots doing here? And they say they're patrolling Ayaka Island after the little earthquake to make sure everyone's good. Then they ask Yukito and Jingi why they're on the first island, and Yukito says they're just returning some lost property. The two knuckleheads assume they're taking it to the police station and offer to tag along, wrong, but Yukito corrects them, saying they're dropping it off with Ibara at Ayaka Security. The second they hear Ayaka Security, they're out, since their boss doesn't exactly get along with those guys. When they get to Ayaka Security's shop, Aka, aka Dinner Gauze, is just about to head out. They tell him they're there to return something, but Aka, who's got this whole crazy Mitama killer vibe, isn't trying to hear it. He tells them to talk to his worker, Mikata, and warns them to be careful on their way back because things could get dicey. They explain to Mikata that they found Ibara's key at her parents' grave and wanted to apologize for partying on such a heavy day. Yukito, being curious, asks what happened to Ibara's parents. Mikata breaks it down. Years ago, a fire Mitama got so out of control, it burned down a whole house. Aka tried to save everyone, but it didn't work out, and Ibara lost her parents that day. Mikata goes on to say that people's lives and the actions of the Mitama are all tied to the flow of ley energy. That's just how their world works, and you might as well accept it with a smile. But not everyone can do that. A lot of people can't, so they take out their anger by hunting down the Mitama. Mikata tells Yukito he should personally give the key to Ibara. He mentions that Ibara is shy but a good kid overall, and then calls her over to the shop. Yukito hands the key to the timid Ibara, and she thanks him, saying losing the key would have caused her a ton of trouble. Out of nowhere, the shop starts shaking, and they assume it's another earthquake, but Jingi says it's actually a fire Mitama with a ton of fire energy. Ibara has a habit of acting impulsively whenever she hears about a Mitama, so she bolts out of the shop to track down the useless creature that killed her parents. Things are looking bad, so Jingi tells Mikata to call Aka before the situation spirals out of control. Aka heads to Sanji to let him know that an Mitama is attacking in the middle of the tourist district. Even though Aka managed to take down the Mitama using his black power, he explains to Sanji that the first island is getting dangerous, and everyone will need to evacuate soon. Meanwhile, Mikata gets a call from Mitama reporting that there's an Mitama in the D Ward, the tourist district. The fire Mitama is already torching a house, and a little girl is trapped inside. Jingi quickly casts his spells and rescues the terrified girl. Ibara, on the other hand, is still running toward the Mitama, so Jingi tells Yukito to chase after her. When Ibara finally reaches the fire Mitama, it's about to attack two random kids. She jumps in and tells them to scram. The fire Mitama then turns its attacks on Ibara, but she keeps throwing spells and dodging its moves. She's getting emotional and refuses to back down because she's determined to avenge her parents' deaths. Unfortunately, she's not strong enough to take on the Mitama. Just as the fire Mitama is about to finish her off with a massive fire attack, Yukito shows up in the nick of time. He blocks the fire attack with a water barrier spell he learned from Jingi. Yukito throwing up that water shield to protect Ibara totally brings back memories of how Aka had her back when the fire Mitama went berserk and killed her parents. While Yukito's holding off the fire Mitama's attack, he checks in with Ibara to see if she's okay. But then, those two clowns, Chitaro and Yako, show up. Honestly, they're so useless it's almost funny. The fire Mitama's not giving up, though it keeps blasting fire at Yukito's barrier, but it can't break through. Yukito tries another spell, saying something about calm water, helping everything and flowing to places people avoid. But since he's still learning, his spell isn't strong enough to take the Mitama down. The Mitama keeps cranking up the heat, and the barrier's starting to struggle. Yukito tells Ibara and the two idiots to make a run for it, saying he'll figure out his own escape before the Mitama gets him. But Ibara's not having it. She says if they run, the Mitama will just chase them, and innocent townsfolk will get caught in the chaos. She's like, I got this, casting a spell with some line about human knowledge and heavenly ways, and she jumps over Yukito's water shield, going straight for the fire Mitama with her glowing hand. But the Mitama's way too strong, and it smacks her back like she's nothing. Ibara's tough though. She tells Yukito to back her up, then charges up and goes at the Mitama again. As expected, the Mitama counters her attack, so Yukito steps in with another spell, saying something cryptic about fish and water. This time, a heavy water barrier slams into the fire Mitama, holding it off for a bit. Just as those two useless fools, Chitaro and Yako, start hyping Yukito up for his spell, the fire Mitama powers up again. The two losers are so scared they're about to wet themselves, but Ibara's not backing down. She says, as lay masters, they're not supposed to run from the Mitama. That seems to snap Yukito out of it, and he decides to stand his ground too. He tells the two goofballs to step up and lend him their strength so they can take on the fire era Mitama together. Surprisingly, they agree. The four of them link up, grab hands, and start throwing down their spells to take on the Mitama. Yako kicks things off with a spell, saying something like, the softest stuff beats the toughest, Ibara doesn't stay behind either. She casts her spell, saying, "The reckless fall, but the careful survive." All their powers combined start wearing the Mitama down, but it tries to bail. No chance. They're not letting it go without handling it. Yukito doubles down with another water spell, trapping the Mitama in a watery prison. Then Ibara steps up with her sparkling light magic, finishing the job and calming the wild creature. Just as they're about to celebrate, 3 more fire Ara Mitama show up out of nowhere. These ones are way tougher, and now the crew's gotta book it. Yukito tries to play the hero, throwing his water spell at them, but it's not enough. They try to make a run for it, but the Mitamas trap them, cutting off their escape and surrounding them in flames. Just when things look bad, Akka and Master Kurama swoop in to save the day. Akka pulls out his special gun and takes out one Mitama, while Kurama uses his spell to calm another. Turns out, this is the first time Akka and Kurama have crossed paths in ages. Akka, being Akka, tries to chow down on the core of the Mitama he shot, but Kurama shuts it down by pacifying it immediately. This ticks Akka off, and he snaps at Kurama to stay out of his way, blaming their master's death on everyone being weak. The last Mitama, which is seriously strong, absorbs the power of the dead and pacified Mitama to level up. Kurama casts another spell to calm part of it, while Akka blasts away to snag the core for himself. Like always, Akka makes his move to grab the core, but Kurama blocks him with a magic blade. Not one to back down, Akka counters with his light magic to cancel out the blade's effect. Things escalate when Akka starts casting his black power spell, and Kurama warns him that eating the Mitama's core might mean he can't turn back into a human. Kurama fires off another spell. Akka claps back with his own spell, saying, "Even storms end when morning comes, it's just nature's way." It's chaos as the two start duking it out. Suddenly, Jingi shows up, drunk as usual, perched on a pole. He casts his own spell, calming the core that's causing all the drama between Akka and Kurama. Then he tells the two to knock it off, warning them that their students might start crying if they keep acting like fools, claiming he saved everyone's lives. The kids aren't having it, roasting him for showing up late like a lost dog, only to steal the spotlight. After all that, Yukito takes a moment to thank Ibara, praising her for staying strong even when it felt like they were done for. He says he's looking forward to teaming up with her again, and she shares her contact info with him. Ibara also tries to share her info with Yako and Shotaro, but because of the tension between their master and Akka, they feel like they need to get permission first. After some real talk, they finally agree to exchange contacts. In this episode, Mokoto starts spilling the tea to Yukito about what went down 10 years ago on Ayaka Island. So, one day, Akka, Kurama, and their boss, Mikoto, roll back home after handling some wild Ara Mitama business. But Akka got banged up pretty bad during the fight. Mikoto doesn't think it's a big deal though, so he tells Mokoto to whip up some food and grab a first aid kit for Akka. Back then, Jingi and Yukito were just little kids, so they weren't allowed to tag along with Mikoto to deal with the Ara Mitama. Mikoto patches up Akka and tells him it's no biggie, he just needs to chill and rest up. Kurama, though, starts throwing shade, saying Akka underestimated the Ara miasma and jumped in too quick. Akka gets ticked off because, in his mind, he was just covering for Kurama, who left himself wide open like a total rookie. They start bickering, but Mokoto shuts it down real quick, saying it's not cool to fight in front of little Yukito. He doesn't want the kid's empty head getting filled with violent nonsense. Yukito, being clueless, asks if the two knuckleheads are fighting, but Jingi, the lazy bum, brushes it off, saying they're just getting along. Mikoto laughs it off with them, and everyone moves on. Later, Kurama gets to work on some spell training and rituals. He starts talking about how the raging supreme beings across the land were told to chill out, and the ones who didn't got kicked out. Even the rocks, trees, and grass stopped whining and went quiet. Then, the emperor left his throne in the high heavens, parted the clouds, and came down to rule Japan. He set up a capital in the middle of the land and built a fancy palace where he ruled peacefully, blessed by the supreme beings of his ancestors. While Kurama's grinding away, Jingi, the lazy idiot, shows up and gives them props for working hard. But Akka's not having it, and tells Jingi to quit slacking and join the training since he's a lay master too. Jingi, being the useless clown he is, says he's a secret weapon and doesn't need to train like some soldier signing up for a death mission. Mikoto overhears this nonsense and gives Jingi a solid kick to the head to knock some sense into him. Akka hits up Master Mikoto and asks if Kuruma can take charge of the dragon calming ritual, but Mikoto's like, nah, the kid's not ready yet. Calming a dragon is next level tough. Akka reminds him that he once said Kuruma would make a great priest for the Kasen shrine someday. Kuruma, on the other hand, doesn't think he's ready to even consider being a priest, but Akka's confident that with his support, Kuruma would totally crush it as a priest. Mikoto says there's no need to rush things, but with Kuruma's skills, he'll be able to handle the rituals in a few years with Akka hyping him up, Lazy Jingy tagging along, and Mikoto keeping an eye on things. The water dragon's already bounced, and now the fire dragon's feeling some type of way, missing his buddy. He's on the verge of turning into Aramama, which is bad news. The plan is to chill him out by sealing him in a volcano, but they've got to keep the volcano from blowing its top until the water dragon comes back. Even if they manage to keep it under control, the fire dragon's power is going to skyrocket. Akka's not sure if suppressing him is the right move, but the masters tell them to pay close attention to what's happening, it'll come in handy later. While they're talking, Mikoto shows up with shaved ice and asks what flavors everyone wants. Of course, Lazy Jingy is the first to shout out strawberry. Mikoto's like, "Hey, nobody gets anything before me." But Jingy doesn't care and keeps doing his thing. A few days later, an earthquake starts shaking things up. Mikoto says he's gotta head to the mainland to grab a custom-made ritual tool to calm the fire dragon. He tells his students to hold down the fort while he's gone. As soon as Mikoto leaves, things start getting weird. The Mitama starts acting up, and the influence of the fourth island begins spreading everywhere. Kuruma's freaking out because the quake seems to have weakened the seal, and if the volcano actually erupts, it'll wipe out the entire Ayaka Islands. The fire dragon originally grew strong enough to dry up the lake and the water dragon in it, and now that they've been keeping him trapped in a barrier, he's about to blow. Their only option is to perform the calming ritual themselves since Mikoto's not around. Akka and Kuruma decide to give it their all and try to pull it off. Jingy's still a scared little kid, so they tell him to stay back with Yukito and Momoko. Akka and Kurama take off to where the fire dragon is running the show, and sure enough, the dragon's already got the island under its control. Akka's like, if this firepower gets out of hand, we're toast. Kurama's all, we've come too far to freak out now. So, they start doing their dragon rituals and prayers. The prayers start to weaken the fire dragon's power. They keep at it, cutting up sedge blades into pieces, scattering them around, and saying prayers to the big guy upstairs. These spells create a barrier that holds back the dragon's firepower. Just when it seems like they're getting the upper hand, the fire dragon shows up in full beast mode, spitting fire everywhere and looking terrifying. The sight of this massive, flaming dragon scares the crap out of the two lay masters. Kurama's like, as long as we keep feeding power into the barrier, it can't break through. But the dragon starts overpowering the barrier. Akka's wiped out and drops to his knees, telling Kurama to keep the barrier up and not worry about him. But Kurama can't just leave Akka hanging, so he bails on the barrier to help Akka, and boom, the dragon smashes through the barrier like it's nothing. Right when it looks like the boys are done for, Master Mikoto shows up. The volcanic eruptions are already going off, so Mikoto uses his spells to seal the fire dragon, trying to save Ayaka from total destruction. Mikoto knows he's gotta put his life on the line to take on the dragon in what feels like a crazy close fight. He tells Kurama to grab Akka and get out of there while he handles the dragon. As they're running, they hear this massive eruption behind them. When morning comes, the island looks like nothing even happened. Akka and Kurama head back, but they find their master's dead body. Mikoto's death hits Akka hard. After the funeral, he leaves the island. Kurama never spills the full story, but Mokoto says she heard the two of them arguing about their future as lay masters before they went their separate ways. Years later, Akka comes back with some dangerous new spells, but things between him and Kurama are tense. Yukito thinks his dad's death is what caused the fallout between them, even though Yukito's dad was the one who brought them together in the first place. Yukito remembers Jingy helping him out during the eruption when he was a kid, and Momoko reminds him that was 10 years ago. Jingy, who couldn't care less about the story, tells Momoko to drop it and move on from the past. Yukito is knocked out, catching some Z's, while Jingy is over there pounding drinks like a total slob. While he's out cold, Yukito drifts into one of his usual dreams, but this time, it's been ages since he's had that dream. He's in the middle of a river, sinking deeper and deeper. Eventually, he gets to this weird part of the river where something that looks like a burning Mitama shows up, and he starts choking. The nightmare jolts him awake, and he's gasping for air like he just ran a 100-meter sprint. Jingy rushes over, asking what's up, and Yukito tells him it was just a bad dream. Then Yukito's phone buzzes his new friends, Yako and Chitaro, are texting him. Jingy's nosy self wants to know who's messaging him, but Yukito quickly hides his phone before reading it. Too bad for him though, because Jingy's already peeping over his shoulder like a giraffe. Turns out Yako and Chitaro are inviting Yukito to the Kasen festival at the Kasen shrine. shrine. It's his first hangout with friends, so Jingi hands him a mask and explains that wearing one is a tradition on the island for the festival. The kicker? The mask used to belong to Yukito's late dad, Master Makoto. When Yukito and Jingi roll up to the Kasen festival, both rocking their masks, Yukito's eyes light up at the sight of the crowd. Jingi's just standing there like, why are you so hyped about seeing people? Didn't you live in the city before? But Yukito's pumped because it's his first time experiencing a festival with other people. A couple of dudes start roasting them, calling them sloppy for how they're dressed. But Jingi couldn't care less. He's all, real men don't need to dress fancy. Jingi then asks Yukito if Makoto gave him any cash, suggesting they blow it all and have a good time. Yukito's totally grossed out by this and snaps back, saying he's never met a master as useless as Jingi, who just mooches off his students and wastes money on stupid stuff. Out of nowhere, Ibara shows up, looking absolutely stunning in a yukata. She immediately calls Jingi out, wondering why this lazy bum is even here. Yukito takes the blame, saying he was the one who brought Jingi along. Jingi pulls Yukito aside and tells him to compliment Ibara on how good she looks in her yukata. But Yukito, being clueless, says he doesn't know how to compliment a girl. Jingi's like, come on man, just say something nice. Finally, Yukito gathers enough courage and tells Ibara she looks great in her yukata. It's time to hit up the festival stalls and chow down on all the awesome food, but Yukito's like, hold up, we gotta track down those two knuckleheads, Chitaro and Yako first. Jingi's not feeling it, though dude's starving and ready to dive into some takoyaki, yakisoba, grilled squid, and all the other tasty stuff. But Yukito's not budging. Finding their friends comes first. Meanwhile, Chitaro and Yako are hanging with Kurama, grilling him about giving out freebies. Yako's like, I saw you hand out 3 charms to someone who just bought an IMA, and Chitaro's all, dude, if you keep giving stuff away, we're gonna go broke. But Kurama's just like, can't help it, man. It makes people happy. Kurama notices Yukito's mask and starts reminiscing about his old master. Yukito's curious and asks why everyone's rocking masks. Kurama explains that back in the day, monsters used to come to the festival, and the masks helped humans forget who they were, so everyone could just vibe and have fun together. Kurama tells the kids to go wild and enjoy the festival, but asks Jingi to stick around and help him at the shop. Jingi's not about that life, though he's like, nah, I'm going with the kids. I'm not missing out on all the good food and fun. Kurama claps back, reminding him that a master shouldn't be mooching off his students, so Jingi's stuck helping out. As they head off, Yako and Chitaro start teasing Ibara, asking why she kept staring at their master while he was talking. She's like, look, your master's my boss's enemy, so I've got to stay alert. The boys are confused, wondering why she's so chill with them if that's the case. You guys are weak, so I'm not worried about you. Out of nowhere, Yukito drops to his knees, feeling a little dizzy. The group freaks out, but he reassures them he's okay. They decide they need to grab some food to fuel up before the real fun begins. And boy, do they have a blast. They're living it up while Jingi's off running some lame errand. At one point, Jingi spots them having the time of their lives, and it stings she's low-key salty about missing out. But then he notices this kid who used to look super down, now rocking a much brighter vibe, and it hits him in the feels. He decides to let the kid enjoy the festival and goes back to doing his thing. Ibara's rocking those Geta sandals, but now she's got some gnarly blisters. Yako's all like, let's grab you some bandages, but Ibara's too shy and says no. Lucky for her, they bump into Momoko, who steps up and helps her out by bandaging her foot. Meanwhile, Sanji's totally out cold because he went a little too hard on the drinks at the festival. Yukito has this smile that's just like his dad Mikoto's, and it's giving everyone some serious nostalgia about how his dad used to grin and cause all kinds of chaos with his buddy Sanji. Yukito's curious to hear more cool stories about his dad, so Mokoto promises that she and Sanji will fill him in later. Then Akka calls Ibara and asks her to hand the phone to Yukito. The second the guys hear Akka's name, they're all freaking out, practically ready to lose it. Yukito picks up the phone, his voice all shaky since Akka's kind of intimidating. Turns out Akka just wants to check if Ibara's having a good time at the festival, and Yukito's like, yeah, she's having a blast. But then, out of nowhere, Yukito's eyes turn this intense, sharp blue, and he starts feeling like he's losing control of his powers, just like when he was a kid. Freaked out about accidentally hurting anyone, he bolts to get away from the crowd. When he finally finds a quiet spot, his powers start going wild. He's trying to get a grip, but it's like everything's spiraling out of control again. He remembers all those times Jingi helped him rein in his powers, so he decides to face his fears head on. He stands up and starts chanting this spell it's hard to make out, but it's deep and mysterious. Finally, he manages to pull himself together and get his powers under control. Out of nowhere, the spirit of his late dad shows up wearing a mask and tells him he's ready to face the truth within himself, then vanishes. Yukito feels like he's seen him before, but can't quite place him. On his way back to his friends, Yukito runs into Jingi, who's drinking like there's no tomorrow. Yukito thanks him for all the help with controlling his powers, and says he's finally able to hang out with his friends again. But before they can chill, they hear some loud noises, and it sounds like something big, maybe even an eruption is going down on the 4th island. Everyone at the Kashin Festival starts freaking out because it feels like something bad is about to go down. Over on the 4th island, there's this massive earthquake with sparks flying and cracks forming everywhere. Shotaro and Yako are so scared they almost wet themselves. Mayor Inusanji grabs a megaphone and tells everyone to stop what they're doing and pay attention. He explains that local officials are checking in with nearby areas to figure out what's going on. He urges everyone to stay calm and head to the center of the plaza. Momoko, who's part of the disaster prevention team, says they'll start sending people home so they can get ready to evacuate the island. The earthquake on the 4th island is so intense that it's shaking things all the way to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd islands. Everyone's on edge, including the Kasen Shrine's black magic folks, Aka and Kurama-sensei. In the middle of all this chaos, Jingi randomly asks Yukito if he likes or hates the island. It's a weird time to ask, but Jingi insists on an answer. Yukito says he likes the island because he's been able to make friends and actually talk to people, unlike back on the mainland. Jingi laughs and says he likes the island too. Then, out of nowhere, Jingi crosses his arms like he's about to cast a spell and vanishes. The next day, there's an announcement from the school on the 2nd island about the earthquake that hit the night before at 8 p.m. Residents are told to calmly head to the evacuation site. The earthquake is still raging on the 4th island, and its effects are being felt everywhere. Yukito's eyes suddenly turn this deep blue color, hinting at some kind of superpower, but it makes him feel dizzy. Momoko shows up just in time to give him his stuff so he can hop on the one-chome boat to evacuate. But Momoko can't leave yet because Jingi hasn't come back, and Yukito decides to stay behind too since he's worried about Jingi. Momoko asks Yukito to help out with a few things while they wait. Meanwhile, Ayaka's disaster prevention department is getting flooded with calls from residents. One of the staff members tells Mayor Inusanji that they've confirmed the 2nd island is safe and ready for evacuation. This news gives Sanji a bit of relief. Yukito checks to make sure everyone from his group is there, and they're all set to head out. Momoko reminds him to keep an eye on the older folks as they get on the boat. The ground starts rumbling again, and people are freaking out, but Momoko calms them down, saying everything's going to be okay. Things are going pretty smoothly with the evacuation on the 2nd island, but Sanji is stressing big time about the 1st island. The fiery energy there has taken over the island's natural energy, which might trigger attacks from the Aramitama. Meanwhile, Aka's body is starting to change, and Ibara is clearly worried because she has no clue what's happening to him. Aka tells her he's fine and just needs to fight one more Aramitama. He tells Ibara to go meet his assistant, Makita, since the Aramitama could show up any second, but Ibara, poor girl, says she wants to stay with him. This reminds Aka of when he wanted to stay with his master 10 years ago. Knowing how dangerous it might get, he insists that Ibara leave. Back at the boat, people are still boarding when Kurama and his 2 goofy students show up out of nowhere. Makoto is caught off guard, but Kurumi says they need to talk to Yukito. Yukito goes with them, and when they get to the 1st island, Kurama says he has something important to tell him about his past. Things get awkwardly quiet, and Shotaro and Yako ask if they should step away to give them privacy, but Kurama says they should stay and listen too. Kurama starts explaining that 15 years ago, the water dragon disappeared in a big way, and Master Makoto stepped in to deal with it. The master had to disconnect the weakened water dragon from the island's energy and give it a new form to help it recover. He temporarily turned the water dragon's massive life force into a smaller form, so it could rebuild its strength and eventually return to the island's energy. That smaller form? Turns out, it's Yukito. Kurama figures out that Yukito is basically the water dragon in human form. He asks Yukito if he can confirm this, and Yukito doesn't fight it. Kurama confirms his theory and realizes that the master pulled the water dragon out of the island's energy and raised it as his son Yukito. To fully awaken his true form and purpose of restoring balance to the island, Yukito will need years of training and learning rituals. Kurama tells him to take it slow and steady. Then Kurama decides to head to the 4th island to do what his master did. His students want to tag along, but he assures them that the laid-back guy, Jingi, will look after them. With that, Kurama pulls out his magical fan, waves it, and flies off into the distance. The 2 knuckleheads suggest heading back to Makoto so they can hop on the boat and ditch the island, but Yukito isn't feeling it. He's not about to run from his fears. He's had run-ins with the Aramitama and other weird stuff, but the island feels like home now. Even though Yukito's still figuring himself out after everything Kurama said, he knows bailing when the island needs him most isn't the move. Yako starts thinking about what Kimura said about following in his master's footsteps to protect the island. Basically, He's ready to sacrifice himself, just like the great master Mikoto did. Yukito's not cool with faiths, convinced there's gotta be another way to stop Kumura. But the two losers, Chatsuro and Yako, are all like, nah, there's nothing we can do, so let's just bounce. Out of nowhere, Ibara shows up and says she's down to stick with Yukito since majority rules. She even jokes that she counts as two people because she's stronger than them and a lay master. They finally agree to team up as friends and figure out a plan together. Meanwhile, Kurama gets zapped over to the 4th island and starts casting some spells. He's talking about how, after a lot of back and forth, the supreme beings decided the emperor should create and rule over a peaceful land. And the emperor was like, sure, I'm in. The supreme beings told everyone to fall in line, and those who didn't got kicked out. Even the rocks, trees, and grass went quiet. Then the emperor left his throne in the high heavens. As Kurama's doing his thing, Akka shows up, but Kurama's like, I don't need you here. They start bickering about who's gonna take on the fire dragon, and then the dragon bursts out of the eruption. Akka starts throwing down with his black magic, and as soon as his hand transforms, he leaps in to attack the dragon. But Kurama uses his magic fan to blow Akka away and says he's got this. Kurama jumps in to fight the dragon, but Akka blocks him. They end up teaming up to take on the dragon, but it's way too strong and starts transforming into Aramidama. Just as the dragon's about to roast them with its fire, Yukito and his crew show up. Yukito throws up a water barrier to block the flames. Kurama yells at them to leave, but they refuse. They're here to help take down the fire dragon. In the first scene of this episode, we flash back to when Yukito and Jingi were just kids, and their master was still alive. One morning, while they were messing around, Yukito's water powers suddenly kicked in, and Jingi got completely soaked. Jingi was confused about what was going on, so Master Mikoto stepped in and explained that Yukito was special and had some seriously strong water abilities. But Mikoto also thought Yukito and Jingi made a good match since Jingi had his own powerful water energy. Then, Mikoto let Jingi in on a secret and told him to keep it to himself, even from Akka and Kurama. Fast forward, and Kurama is trying to talk some sense into the kids, telling them to quit messing around and stay out of the fight with the fire dragon. But Yukito isn't having either, thinks it'd be way worse to bail when the Yanagi school needs them the most. Akka, being the tough guy, figures it's too late to send the kids away anyway. Since they're here, they might as well help, and if things get too wild, they can always retreat. Akka tells the kids to back them up and keep an eye on things while they take on the fire dragon. Kurama isn't thrilled about this plan, but it's not the time to act like a fool, so he warns the kids not to push themselves too hard. Akka and Kurama fly off to face the dragon, while Ibara leads the kids and tells Yukito to use his water barrier power to help contain the dragon. Akka makes the first move, attacking the fire dragon with his dark powers. He flies up and starts casting spells. Kurama backs him up with his own spells, talking about how the formless can slip into cracks. Yukito jumps in too, using his water powers to send a wave crashing into the fiery dragon. Not wanting to be left behind, Ibara casts her spell, comparing heaven's ways to stringing a bow. Eika goes in with his black hand attack, while Ibara hits the dragon from the other side with her thunder spark power. The dragon goes wild, blasting a massive wave of fire at them. Kurama steps up with his magic fan to block the flames from hitting Akka, but Akka, being the stubborn guy he is, doesn't want Kurama's help. Kurama brushes it off, knowing this isn't the time to argue in the middle of a fight. As the battle rages on, Yukito starts to wonder if he might actually be the reincarnation of the water dragon. The story kicks off again, throwing us back to the past. Yukito's true identity? It's on the down low. Only Jingi and the master know the deal. Akka and Kurama? Clueless. Jingi's totally stoked about this secretits like his prized possession, and he loves spilling the tea about it when the older kids aren't around. Little Jingi once asked the master if he'd get to see Yukito again before the water dragon showed up, but the master told him nah. Yukito would probably be chill by the time he hit Akka and Kurama's age. To keep his human form, even if he gets his powers back, it's all on Yukito. But, the master added, pulling that off would take one hell of a complicated spell. After Makoto died, Major Inusanji let Momoko know it was Makoto's dying wish for Yukito to stay in an orphanage until he turned 15. Mom wasn't feeling it sending a kid who just lost his dad to an orphanage? Harsh. But Jingi figured the master must have had a good reason, so he thought they should roll with it. Jingi also knew Yukito got sent to the mainland because of his water dragon vibes, but he wasn't sure how things would pan out if the poor kid grew up there. Now that the master was gone, who was going to cast the spell to turn Yukito back into a water dragon? Someone had to step up, And that someone? Jingy. So, he dove headfirst into the master's spellbooks, but only found bits and pieces of notes. Luckily, being a Yanagi school student, Jingy managed to crack the code and figure out what kind of spell it was. Fast forward, and the fight with the fire dragon is heating up literally. Things got so wild that Akka had to whip out his special gun and take a shot at the dragon. Now that Yukito's clued in on his powers, he's ready to let loose. Kurama's not about to back down either, so he throws out another spell. Turns out, this was one of Master Mikoto's spells, so Akka's all like, what's about to go down? The spell's supposed to seal the fire dragon back into the ground, but nope, the dragon busts right through it. The spell's a dud, so Akka tries again, saying, victory comes from pride, and pride comes from wickedness. After that, Akka morphs into this demi-human dude with horns, but even in his new form, he can't take the dragon out. The fight's looking way too big for the kids to handle, so Kurama's thinking he might have to use his magic to get them out of there before it all goes sideways. But the kids? They're not about to bail. Yukito's feeling like total trash, wondering why he's so useless even though everyone keeps hyping up his supposed powers. Then, out of nowhere, Jingy, the drunk guy who never seems to care, shows up at the scene. We're thrown back in time a little. Jingy had read this wild story about a hermit who gave up his life to bring balance back to Ayaka Island when a fire dragon went berserk because the water dragon lost its mojo. Fast forward, the same chaos happens again, and now Master Mikoto has to step up and do what the hermit did, sacrifice himself and put his own spin on the legendary spell. Mikoto raised a water dragon like it was his own kid and brought its strength back. Jingy wasn't sure if his master's version of the spell would cut it, but hey, it was all he had, so he had to trust it. Problem was, someone still had to actually cast the spell since Mikoto was gone. If no one did, the island would go to hell unlivable, just like before. And guess what? That someone had to be Jingy. Luckily, Jingy didn't have much tying him down, no family, just a couple of loose connections. Giving up his life for the island's peace wasn't really his vibe, but he felt like he owed the place for raising him, so he made a deal with himself. He'd live life on his terms, have fun, and go out with no regrets. That's why he started partying hard and drinking like there was no tomorrow. Fast forward 10 years, Jingy shows up to pick up Yukito on his graduation day. He had figured Yukito would grow up to be all moody and dark, but after hanging with him, he realized the kid was actually pretty genuine. Yukito's smile hit Jingy right in the feel-sit, made him think, yeah, I could die for this kid. Jingy had lived the way he wanted, so he wasn't scared of regrets. But when the moment finally came, he was shook at how much he didn't want to die. Still, he loved Yukito and Ayaka Island so much, he was willing to go through with it. Jingy then asks Yukito if he wants his full water powers back. He promises he can make it happen since he's figured out the spell. Yukito, being all about protecting Ayaka Island, tells Jingy to go for it if he's really got the juice to pull it off. So, Jingy taps into a massive amount of ley energy and breaks it down for Yukito. To restore the water dragon, a big shot ley master needs to act like a bridge, connecting the dragon's soul to the ley energy. Jingy tells Yukito to jump into the ley energy swirling around them, but Yukito's all, wait, what happens after that? Jingy keeps it real and says that, just like the hermit, he's gonna sacrifice himself so Yukito can get his water powers back. Without giving Yukito much of a choice, Jingy pulls him into the ley energy pool. Yukito's powers get restored, and Boomhei transforms into a full-blown water dragon. So it's a showdown between the water dragon and the fire dragon. Yukito, who's turned into a water dragon, goes all out, throwing a whole squad of water dragons at the blazing fire dragon. The fire dragon fights back, trying to shake off the water's effects. Yukito's water dragon wraps itself around the fire dragon, but the fire dragon keeps dodging and squirming to break free. Meanwhile, the two goofballs, Chataro and Yako, are losing their minds, shocked that Yukito's strong enough to control the water dragon. The fight is intense, with the water dragon hammering the fire dragon, but the fire dragon still manages to spit some flames. It's a full-on clash, and Chitaro's yelling like a maniac, hyping Yukito up. But Ibara's freaking out, worried about what'll happen if Yukito loses. The dragons keep smashing into each other, but Kurumi thinks it's less about destruction and more like they're trying to find balance through all this chaos. No regular human could handle this kind of mess. The fight drags on, and now Akka and the gang are on edge, unsure if Yukito will survive or even turn back into his human form. Kurama figures there's nothing they can do except watch and hope for the best. After a brutal back and forth, the fire dragon finally calms down, its rage neutralized, and peace is restored. With the fire dragon subdued, Yukito heads over to Jingi, who's sprawled on the ground like a lifeless log. Yukito tells the drunk fool to get up before he catches a cold, but it's too late. Jingi's already dead. Yukito keeps talking to him, hoping he'll wake up, but Jingi gave up his life to cast the spell that restored Yukito's power. Word spreads to First Island that the fire dragon's been taken care of, and everyone's partying like it's the end of World War III. But Jingi's death hits hard for Yukito, Aka, Ibara, Kurama, and his crew of lumberjack students. Ibara and her boss, Aka, head home looking totally crushed over losing Jingi, the scapegoat of it all. Mitaka notices Aka's down in the dumps for the first time ever and asks Ibara what's up. Ibara says she'll explain everything once they're inside. Yukito's feeling pretty down after losing someone he now sees as a brother. Kurama decides to follow the kid home, worried about his mental state. When they get to the house, Momoko, who's been stressing over Yukito and Jingi, finally breathes a sigh of relief. She figures Yukito would be happy after calming down the fire dragon, but instead, he looks super bummed out, which gets her curious. She asks about Jingi, and that's when she gets hit with the bad news. It's like everything's falling apart for the family, and people start showing up to pay their respects to Jingi not as a loser, but as a hero. Even the guy who used to sell booze to Jingi mentions how Jingi baked him a cake to settle his debts. Turns out, the guy had no clue Jingi was preparing for his own death. Ibara, Chitaro, and Yako get together to share memories of Jingi, but honestly, they can't think of a single good one. Jingi was kind of a mess when he was alive, hopeless, and addicted to alcohol. Still, they don't hate him for it. While they're mourning his death, they can't help but wonder how Yukito, Jingi's closest brother, is holding up. Mayor Inu Sanji stops by Jingi's place and sees that the poor guy had even cleaned up his room before he passed. Sanji starts reflecting on Jingi's life. Jingi never really thought about how his actions affected others, and now Sanji's stuck dealing with everything he left behind. Jingi was always a stubborn kid and gave Sanji, his guardian, a hard time, but his death is something Sanji never wanted to face. Meanwhile, Aka's struggling to believe that Yukito is actually the water dragon. He's wondering where the kid even learned those spells. That's when Kurama pulls out their master's book and explains to Aka that he found it in Jingi's room. The book has spells used by the previous lay master, written down by Master Makoto, probably for future use. Kurama knows there's no way Jingi mastered those spells easily, considering his skill level. The guy must have worked his butt off for a long time, even sacrificing his life to pull it off all just to save the island from the fire dragon and the era miasma. Aka gets emotional and calls Jingi an idiot for keeping it all a secret, but Kurama thinks Jingi hid it because he knew if they'd found out about the spell, they'd have tried to sacrifice themselves instead. To keep the island in balance and bring back peace, Kurama had to sacrifice himself to cast a spell and restore the fire dragon. Aka wasn't cool with this at all. He felt like Kurama didn't care who had to die as long as peace was restored. Furious, Aka grabbed Kurama by the collar and started yelling at him like a rabid dog. Kurama brushed Aka's hand off and snapped back, saying Aka didn't know him at all. Kurama shouted that he risked everything trying to calm the fire dragon but failed. As the heir of the Kasen Shrine and Yanagi's top student, he felt like a total failure. Then, he smacked Aka on the head to knock some sense into him, accusing him of using dark magic. Aka fired back, saying Kurama didn't get him either. He admitted he was ready to do whatever it took, sell his skills, gain power just to beat the fire dragon and save the island, but he also failed. Both of them felt like losers, and it all spiraled into a fist fight. Before things got too wild, Ibara and Kurama's students stepped in and stopped them from turning it into some WWE-style showdown. Meanwhile, Yukito was holed up in his room, still wrecked over Jingi's death. Momoko came by to cheer him up, but Yukito couldn't stop blaming himself. He thought if he'd been stronger, Jingi wouldn't have had to die or cast the spell that cost him his life. Momoko tried to convince him to at least come out and see Jingi's body before the funeral. Eventually, Yukito went to Sanji's room, where Sanji was keeping watch after everyone else had left. Sanji thanked Yukito for calming the dragon and saving the island, but Yukito said it wasn't him, it was Jingi who cast the spell that restored the dragon's water at the cost of his own life. Yukito explained how this wasn't the first time something like this happened. 10 years ago, Master Makoto sacrificed himself for the same reason. Sanji suggested Yukito spend some time with Jingi's body. Yukito did, but it just made him angrier. He thought it was selfish of Jingi to give up his life like that. Out of nowhere, Yukito found himself in some strange realm, filled with intense lay energy. He had no clue what was going on, but then he saw Jingi trapped in the shallow part of the energy, calling for help. Yukito, clueless about what to do, snapped back to reality. He told Sanji and Momoko about what he saw and said there might still be a way to bring Jingi back. He urged them to gather Kurama and the others to figure it out. Yukito starts running like he's being chased by a rabid dog. He zooms past Aka's shop and Kurama's place. Aka wonders where Yukito's rushing off to so late at night, but jokes he might need Google to figure it out. As Yukito keeps running, sparks, water, and harmless Mitama start popping up with every step he takes. The water pools up, and Yukito has to use his powers to leap over it. Before he knows it, he's back in the middle of a giant river of lei energy. At some point, he transforms into a water dragon, and when he shifts back to his normal self, the lei energy river has grown even bigger. Yukito starts wandering around in the river, looking lost. He spots some Mitama floating in the energy and wonders if this is where all life flows together, or if the lei energy itself is the chain that connects everything. Yukito knows he has to find Jingi in the lei energy and get him back, even if it means dragging him out by the scruff of his neck. He swims deeper into the lei energy, heading toward its densest part. Suddenly, he spots a core mantle, but it vanishes just as quickly as it appeared. Confused, he hears a deep, raspy voice out of nowhere. When he turns around, he's shocked to see his late father, Makoto, wearing a mask and speaking in riddles. It doesn't take Yukito long to figure out who's behind the mask. Makoto explains that Yukito's human form is a reflection of his own self-image, and all of this wouldn't have been possible if Yukito had grown up on Ayaka Island with him. Yukito asks his father what he's doing in the river of lei energy. Makoto explains he's been keeping the fire dragon in check until the water dragon Yukito awakened. Now that Yukito's powers have kicked in, Makoto says Yukito has become more important than he is. He admits there was a risk Yukito would have been consumed by the fire dragon's influence if he'd grown up near it, so Makoto made sure he was raised as a regular human far away from the island. This distance weakened Yukito's connection to the fire dragon and allowed him to grow into someone who could understand and connect with the island's people. Makoto says that if things had been different, they could have stayed together, but this was the only way to protect him. Makoto then asks Yukito why he's in the lei energy. Yukito explains he's looking for Jingi and asks if his father has seen him. Makoto knows where Jingi is and mentions he's clinging to a landmark Yukito left behind, but he warns that Jingi might have been swept away by the massive lei energy. This freaks Yukito out, and he begs his father to take him to Jingi. Reluctantly, Makoto agrees to help. However, the lei energy starts pushing back, making it harder for Yukito to move. Makoto tells him to stay calm and keep his cool, or he'll get separated from him. Yukito realizes he can't force his way through because the Mitama in the lei energy could turn into Ara Mitama if he does. So, Yukito uses a spell Jingi taught him, and seeing this makes Makoto proud, knowing Yukito learned something valuable. Regaining his composure, Yukito continues his journey with his father, determined to find Jingi in the depths of the lei energy. As the story kicks off, the island starts shaking like crazy. Even though the fire dragon's been calmed down, Yako feels like the land is hers to claim. Out of nowhere, Ara Mitama shows up, but the guys are ready to throw down to keep it from messing with their master, who's busy doing rituals and chanting spells tied to Yukito. Right when they're about to attack Ara Mitama, a gunshot rings out. It's Mr. Aka. Aka takes it down with his magic-infused gun, and the Ara Mitama goes down like a burnt-out matchstick. Ibara asks where Yukito is, and Shitaro says he went to the lei to save Jingi, who's stuck in the lei's energy. But Aka doesn't think Yukito can make it back from all that intense lei energy. Yukito knows it's nuts to dive into the lei energy, but he jumps in anyway. What a reckless dude. More Aramitama show up, and Kurama thinks his ritual is attracting them from the lei energy. Aka says if that's the case, he's not letting any of them interfere with Kurama's ritual. Yukito and Makoto finally reach Jingi, who's crying like a baby for help since he's getting swept away by the lei energy. Yukito grabs him and calls him out for dying and leaving everyone else to grieve. He thinks it's selfish to die without thinking about how it'll hurt his people. Jingi says he had no choice but to sacrifice himself for his folks. But Makoto smacks him and tells him there were other ways to handle it instead of throwing his life away. Makoto explains he left a spell for emergencies and even told Sanji to bring Yukito to the island when he turned 15. If the water dragon inside Yukito didn't awaken in time, they were supposed to prepare to burn the island down instead of letting anyone sacrifice themselves. Jingi argues that it's easy for a big-shot hermit to say that, but regular people have their own struggles and emotions. The conversation starts dragging, so Jingi cuts to the chase and asks Yukito how he's planning to bring him back to life since that's why he jumped into the lei energy in the first place. Yukito isn't sure it's even possible to bring someone back from the dead, but Makoto is confident it can be done. Yukito gets caught up in the lei energy and doesn't know how to get back to the island. Luckily, Major still knows the way because Yukito broke his seal when he he entered the ley energy, but Major says it'll take 40 to 50 years to get out. This ticks Jingy off since he's eager to get back, so he tells Makoto to stop with the hermit talk. Yukito spots a bright light in the distance and suggests they follow it. Makoto, happy to have had this chat with his guys after so long, gives them his blessing and tells them to head back to Earth. Meanwhile, Kurama keeps working on his rituals to bring Jingy and Yukito back. Suddenly, he senses the guys are moving toward the surface, so he calls Akka to step in and use his black magic to pull them out. Akka has to stick his black magic-infused hand into the ley energy to drag them out. The process is tough as hell since it takes a ton of power and effort. Ibara, Yako, and Shitaro start praying for Yukito to make it back alive. Akka slowly starts pulling Yukito out of the ley energy, but the fire dragon shows up to block it doesn't want the water dragon to leave. Yukito, as the water dragon, promises the fire dragon he'll come back, so it lets them go. Yukito makes it out alive, and Jingy's lifeless body, which was lying at home like a piece of deadwood, suddenly springs back to life.